They were already calling security when Daniel Wright stood up. The conference room went quiet in the way rooms only do when power shifts. Chairs stopped creaking. Pens froze midair. Someone's phone vibrated once and was silenced too fast. At the head of the table, Eleanor Brooks did not look at him. She stared at the spreadsheet projected on the glass wall jaw, locked one hand flat against the table like she was holding something down. "This meeting is over," the compliance officer said, voice tight. "Mr. Wright, you were not authorized to speak." Daniel did not sit back down. He felt his pulse in his throat. Slow, heavy, controlled. He had learned that kind of control years ago, long before this company, long before this room. He looked around at the senior partners, at the outside auditors, at the woman from legal who would not meet his eyes. He could smell burnt coffee and the faint citrus of disinfectant. A corporate building always smelled like money trying to stay clean. "You're right," Daniel said quietly. "I wasn't authorized. But if I don't say this now, someone here will go to prison." That was when Eleanor finally turned. Her eyes were sharp, not surprised, not angry, calculating. The look she used when markets collapsed and other people panicked. The look that had built this firm from a rented office and a folding table into a financial advisory empire worth hundreds of millions. She did not tell him to stop. She let him talk. 2 hours earlier, no one in this building would have imagined Daniel Wright standing in that position. At 8:15 that morning, he had been exactly where he always was. Desk tucked against the wall outside the executive corridor. Coffee cooling beside his keyboard. Jacket folded with military neatness over the back of his chair. The city of Chicago glowed pale blue through the windows, Lake Michigan flat and cold under low clouds. Daniel had already cleared 3 scheduling conflicts, corrected a reporting error that would have cost a client 7 figures, and rerouted a call from New York before most people finished their first sip. He was known, trusted, relied on, but never invited inside the room. Eleanor Brooks walked past him every morning at 8:15, always the same stride, always the same dark suit, always the same absence of acknowledgement beyond a nod so slight it barely counted. Daniel did not resent it. Distance was policy. Distance was protection. For her and for him. That was before the box arrived. It came just after 9. A delivery man in a navy jacket. No logo, no chit-chat. He set the box on Daniel's desk and slid a clipboard toward him. Daniel hesitated before signing. The cardboard was heavy, sturdy, too deliberate for office supplies. Inside was a single object, matte black, leather-bound, no return address, and beneath it a folded card. Daniel did not open the box right away. He felt something tighten low in his chest, the way it did when a memory tried to surface uninvited. He slid the card out first. "You should check the Catalyst account. Before noon, no name, no explanation." Daniel did not move for a long moment. The office noise flowed around him. Phones rang, printers hummed. Someone laughed near the break room. Normal life unaware that something had just been tipped off balance. Catalyst was one of their oldest clients. Conservative, clean, boring in the way investors liked. Eleanor trusted that account the way some people trusted gravity. Daniel closed the card and slid it into his drawer. He did not look inside the box yet. He pulled up the account instead. What he saw made his fingers go cold. The numbers were right. Too right. Perfect curves, predictable risk exposure. Returns smoothed into something almost beautiful. That was the problem. Real markets did not behave like that. Daniel leaned closer to the screen. His breath slowed. He pulled transaction logs, cross-checked timestamps, traced transfers through 3 layers of shell reporting. His jaw tightened. Someone had been shaving risk. Quietly, carefully, over years, not stealing, hiding. By 10:30, Daniel knew what it was. A deferred liability structure that looked legal on paper, but violated federal disclosure law the moment market volatility crossed a certain threshold. A threshold they were about to cross. Publicly, loudly, in days. Someone inside the firm had buried it so well that even Eleanor's people had missed it. Someone had counted on Daniel not looking. At 11, Eleanor called an emergency meeting. Compliance. Legal. External auditors. No assistance. Daniel stayed at his desk. That was when the second delivery arrived. This time, no box. Just a single white envelope placed gently beside his keyboard while he was on the phone. He noticed it only after the call ended. The handwriting was neat, old-fashioned, for the man who still believes in doing the right thing when it costs him. Daniel stared at it longer than he should have. He did not open it. He stood up instead. The conference room doors were closed. Frosted glass, raised voices inside. Eleanor's voice was calm, controlled. She was explaining something, managing, buying time. Daniel knew that tone. It was the tone people used right before the ground disappeared. He knocked once. A junior partner opened the door, startled. "Daniel, this is—" "I know," Daniel said. He stepped past him. That was how he ended up standing there with security already halfway to the room and Eleanor watching him like she had always watched markets. Not with emotion, with attention. "If you're wrong," the legal woman said, finally meeting his eyes, "you've just ended your career." Daniel nodded. "I know." "And if you're right," the compliance officer added, voice shaking, "this goes public. Today." Daniel nodded again. Eleanor held up one hand. Silence fell like a blade. She studied him. Not as an assistant, not as a resource, but as a variable she had never fully priced in. "How do you know?" she asked. Daniel took a breath. He thought of his father, hands shaking over hospital forms, of years spent learning to read what other people ignored, of the box still unopened on his desk. Because whoever did this assumed the person closest to the details would never speak unless asked. He said. And they were right. Until now. The security guard stopped at the door, uncertain. Eleanor did not look away. "Lock the room," she said. And in that moment, the man they had never invited inside became the only one who could save them. The door sealed with a muted click that sounded louder than it should have. Eleanor Brooks watched the compliance officer reach for the remote, watched the glass walls tint just enough to blur the outside corridor. Privacy mode. No witnesses, no exits. The kind of room designed for decisions that changed lives. Daniel stood where he was, hands at his sides, posture straight, but not defiant. He felt the room press in on him, the low hum of the projector, the smell of recycled air, the faint tremor in his left knee that he forced into stillness. "Start from the beginning," Eleanor said. "Not please. Not now. Start." Daniel stepped forward once, not toward her, toward the table, toward the documents spread like a battlefield. He placed his hand flat on the surface, felt the cool glass under his palm. "Catalyst was never meant to be aggressive," he said. "That's why it worked. That's why no one looked too closely." The structure depended on predictability. But the market shifted after the last regulatory update. Quietly. Buried in technical language, most firms adjusted. We didn't. The outside auditor frowned. "That's not accurate. Our filings are technically compliant until volatility crosses a margin you assumed would never be breached," Daniel said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to, but it already has. Just not where you're measuring it. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded sheet, not a printout. Handwritten notes, numbers, dates, arrows connecting patterns most people did not bother to connect. He slid it across the table. The auditor leaned in. The legal counsel inhaled sharply. Eleanor said nothing. Daniel continued. The liability is deferred through a secondary vehicle registered under a subsidiary that hasn't been audited in 3 years because it technically doesn't have to be. Someone realized that. Someone used it to smooth exposure. Not to steal. To delay. Delay what the compliance officer asked. A reckoning, Daniel said. One that hits this firm the moment the next quarterly report goes public. The room shifted. Chairs creaked. Someone swore under their breath. Eleanor finally sat down. Slowly. She laced her fingers together, knuckles pale. Who did it? Daniel hesitated. He had expected that question. He had hoped she would not ask it yet. I don't know, he said. Not for certain, but I know how. That was when the door handle rattled once. A firm knock. 2 beats. Authority, security. Eleanor did not look back. Hold, she said without turning her head. The knocking stopped. She looked at Daniel again, this time differently. Less like a CEO assessing risk. More like a general realizing one of her soldiers had been fighting a war she did not know existed. How long have you known? Since this morning, Daniel said. But the signs were there longer. I just wasn't asked to look. The words landed heavier than he intended. He felt it immediately. The way Eleanor's eyes narrowed not in anger, but in recognition. Something like guilt flickered and was gone. You could have come to me, she said. Daniel met her gaze. I wasn't sure you'd listen. Silence stretched. Dense. Loaded. Outside the room, the building continued its quiet churn. Emails sent, calls answered. Lives moving forward unaware that the firm's future balanced on a thin line of truth and timing. The legal counsel cleared her throat. If this goes public before we correct it, we're looking at federal exposure. Not a fine. Charges. Eleanor nodded once. I know. She stood. Walked to the glass wall. Rested her hand against it. The city beyond was blurred but familiar. This firm was her life's work. Built after her husband died. Built because control was the only thing that had kept her standing when everything else collapsed. Who else knows, she asked. Daniel did not answer immediately. He thought of the black box still on his desk. The note. The careful wording. Not a threat. A warning. One other person, he said. I think. Eleanor turned sharply. Think. The message didn't ask for money. Or leverage. It asked me to look. That tells me this wasn't meant to be exposed yet. Someone inside is afraid of what happens next. And you, the auditor, said suspicion creeping in just happened to be the one who noticed. Daniel's jaw tightened. No, he said. I was the one close enough to notice and far enough down the chain to be ignored. That earned him a look from Eleanor he could not read. She returned to the table. We fix this quietly. Today. We freeze Catalyst. We notify regulators before they notify us. We take the hit on our terms. That buys us time, the legal counsel said. Not immunity. It buys us credibility, Eleanor said. And that still matters. She looked at Daniel. You're coming with me. He blinked. Where? Every meeting. Every call. You don't speak unless I ask. You listen. You watch. You tell me what I'm missing. A promotion. A spotlight. Everything Daniel had spent years avoiding. He nodded anyway. Understood. The door unlocked. The meeting dissolved into motion. Phones came out. Orders were given. The machine spun up fast. As they filed out, Eleanor fell into step beside him. Not ahead. Not behind. Why didn't you open the box? She asked quietly. Daniel stopped walking. She stopped too. What box, she added, watching his face. The one that came to my desk, Daniel said. I knew it wasn't a gift. Gifts want attention. This wanted patience. Eleanor studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Bring it to my office. Her office was silent when they entered. Sunlight cut across the floor in hard lines. She closed the door herself. No assistant, no interruptions. Daniel set the box on her desk. He opened it slowly. Inside was a ledger. Old. Leather worn soft at the edges. Handwritten entries dating back years. Names. Transfers. Internal approvals signed by people who no longer worked there. People Eleanor had trusted, promoted, defended. Eleanor's breath caught. At the back of the ledger was a final page. One line. When this breaks, it will break the wrong people first. Daniel looked at her. Someone wants it handled before that happens. Eleanor closed the ledger with care. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were not. Then we're already late. Her phone vibrated. She checked it. Once. Her mouth tightened. Board call in 10 minutes. Daniel nodded. They won't like this. They don't have to, Eleanor said. They have to survive it. She paused, looked at him again. Really looked. You should know something. Yes, Daniel said. I noticed you a long time ago, she said. I just chose not to act on it. That was my mistake. Before he could respond, the phone rang again. The moment passed, but it did not disappear. As they walked toward the boardroom, Daniel felt the weight of the ledger, the warning, the eyes that were finally on him. Somewhere in the building, the person who had sent the box was watching the clock. And for the first time, Daniel understood that being unseen had never made him safe. It had only delayed the moment when everything would come due. The board call began with silence. Not the comfortable kind, the kind that pressed against the ears until someone cracked. Eleanor Brooks stood at the head of the long table phone on speaker legal counsel, seated to her right, compliance to her left. Daniel took the chair closest to the wall. Not invited, not dismissed. Observing. Always observing. Eleanor, a man's voice finally said, calm and sharp. East Coast clipped. We're hearing rumors. I don't like rumors. I don't either, Eleanor replied. That's why I called. Daniel watched her hands. Steady. Fingers lightly resting on the table, not gripping. Control was muscle memory for her. We have an exposure issue tied to Catalyst, she continued. It predates the last regulatory update. It was structured to delay disclosure, not eliminate it. The delay is ending. A pause. Someone inhaled on the other end. Who authorized that structure? That's what we're determining, Eleanor said. But the liability is real. We can correct it now, disclose voluntarily, and protect the firm's credibility. Or we can wait and let regulators discover it. I won't recommend the second option. Another voice cut in. Female. Older. You're asking us to approve a self-report that could cost us 8 figures. 8 figures now, Eleanor said, or criminal exposure later. Daniel felt the room tighten. He noticed the legal counsel's foot tapping once, then stopping, fear leaking through professional skin. And this information, the first voice said slowly, where did it come from? Eleanor did not look at Daniel when she answered. From an internal review prompted this morning. That's vague. It's sufficient, Eleanor said. The data is solid. We can provide documentation within the hour. Silence again, then a different tone. Softer. Dangerous. You sound confident. I am, Eleanor said. Because I trust the analysis. Daniel felt it then. The shift. She was staking something personal now. Not just the firm. Herself. All right, the man said. Proceed with caution. We'll reconvene after the initial disclosure. Eleanor, if this explodes, it explodes on you. I know, she said. That's why I'm standing here. The call ended. No one spoke for a moment. Then the compliance officer exhaled hard. That was handled. Eleanor turned to Daniel. Walk with me. They moved fast through the corridor. Phones rang behind them. Staff stepped aside instinctively. Eleanor did not slow. Daniel matched her pace without effort. He had learned long ago how to move through spaces where he did not officially belong. Inside her office, Eleanor closed the door and leaned against it just for a second. A crack in the armor. Then she straightened. You said someone wanted this handled before it broke the wrong people, she said. Who are the wrong people? Daniel shook his head. I don't know yet, but the ledger names mid-level approvals, people with families, mortgages. Not the kind who walk away clean if this goes public the wrong way. Eleanor's jaw tightened. And the right people. Are the ones who disappear when things surface, Daniel said. They always do. Her phone buzzed again. She ignored it. Why you? She asked quietly. Why send this to you? Daniel thought of the envelope, the wording. Not praise, not flattery. A nudge. Because I sit close enough to the machinery to see patterns, he said, and far enough away to not be assumed complicit. That distance again, Eleanor said, not accusing, reflective. Yes, Daniel said. It's useful until it isn't. A knock at the door interrupted them. Soft. Controlled. Eleanor opened it to find Margaret Lewis from Internal Audit, 62, steel gray hair, eyes that missed nothing. I heard about Catalyst, Margaret said. Her gaze flicked to Daniel, lingered half a beat too long. We need to talk. Come in, Eleanor said. Margaret did not sit. She crossed her arms. I ran a shadow audit last quarter. Off the books. Something didn't sit right. I didn't have enough to escalate. And now Eleanor said. And now I think I know why Margaret said. Someone has been feeding you breadcrumbs. Daniel met her eyes. Warnings, he said. Not directions. Margaret studied him, then nodded once. Approval. Or at least respect. There's more, she said. Catalyst isn't the only account with delayed exposure. It's the largest, the cleanest, but not the only one. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something had hardened. How many? 3, Margaret said. All tied to the same approval chain, all buried just deep enough. Daniel felt a cold clarity settle over him. Then this isn't damage control, he said. It's containment. Margaret smiled thinly. Welcome to the real problem. As Margaret left, Eleanor turned to Daniel again. You're not going back to your desk. I didn't ask to be reassigned, Daniel said. I know, Eleanor replied. I'm telling you, temporarily. Until we understand the scope. He hesitated. That will draw attention. It already has, she said. You think security didn't notice who stopped a locked boardroom this morning? He nodded. Then I want conditions. Her eyebrow lifted. Excuse me, I don't operate in shadows without clarity, Daniel said. No side deals, no quiet scapegoats. If names go on paper, they're accurate. The room held its breath. Eleanor looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Agreed. Another buzz. This time Daniel's phone. An unknown number. One message. You moved faster than expected. Good. But speed attracts eyes. Be careful which ones you trust. Daniel did not show her the message. Not yet. Outside the office, whispers had begun. A junior analyst glanced at Daniel as he passed, curious, measuring, a rumor forming in real time. As the afternoon stretched on, reports stacked up, calls blurred together. Eleanor led decisive and relentless. Daniel listened, cataloged, connected dots others missed. He caught a discrepancy in a subsidiary timeline that saved them from an incomplete disclosure. He flagged a name in the ledger that made legal go pale. By evening, the building had thinned. Lights dimmed row by row. The city outside turned amber. Daniel stood at the window in Eleanor's office, looking down at traffic crawling like veins. He felt the weight of the day settle into his bones. He was visible now. Exposed. Useful. Eleanor joined him. Not beside. Just close enough. "You did well today," she said. He nodded. "It's not over." "No," she agreed. "It's just beginning." She paused. "You should know something else." "Yes." "When this breaks," she said, "people will look for someone to blame. I won't let it be you." Daniel turned to her. "I didn't step forward to be protected." A corner of her mouth tightened. "Respect again." "I know," she said. "That's what worries me." His phone vibrated once more. Another message. "Tomorrow, the flowers stop. After that, the real test begins." Daniel slipped the phone back into his pocket. He met Eleanor's gaze, steady and unflinching. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. The city moved on, unaware that lines had already been crossed, and that the man no one had invited into the room was now standing at the center of a storm that had been building for years. The first subpoena arrived before sunrise. Daniel was already awake when his phone lit up on the nightstand. 5:40 in the morning. Chicago still dark, the city holding its breath before the day pretended to be normal again. The message was from legal. Federal request for records, limited scope. Expedited timeline. The kind of language that smiled while it sharpened its teeth. By 7, Eleanor was in the office. Not 8:15. Not her usual controlled entrance. 7 sharp. Coat already off. Sleeves rolled. Coffee untouched on her desk. When Daniel stepped in, she was standing at the window phone pressed to her ear, voice low and precise. "We comply fully." "Yes, today." "No, I won't delay." "You'll have it before close of business." She ended the call and turned. Her eyes were clear, focused. No trace of the crack from yesterday. "They moved faster than expected," she said. Daniel nodded. "That means someone wanted them to." She did not argue. The day unfolded like a controlled burn. Files requested. Calls routed. Margaret Lewis arrived with a banker's box full of printouts, her mouth set in a hard line. 3 accounts, she said. But Catalyst is the pressure point. If that one holds, the others don't detonate. Unless someone pushes, Eleanor said. Unless someone pushes, Margaret agreed. By mid-morning, the rumors were no longer whispers. A junior associate lingered too long outside Eleanor's office. 2 partners stopped talking when Daniel walked past. He felt eyes on him now, measuring, recalculating. The distance that had once protected him was gone. At 10:30, Eleanor called an emergency leadership huddle. No board, no assistants, just people who mattered and people who thought they did. Daniel sat against the wall again. He watched shoulders tense when Eleanor spoke his name. He watched the way some people looked at him like he was an answer they didn't want. "We are cooperating fully," Eleanor said. "Voluntary disclosure buys us credibility. Panic costs us everything. If anyone here thinks leaking partial information protects them, they're wrong." A man near the end of the table shifted. Too fast. Too defensive. Daniel noted it. After the meeting broke, Eleanor did not dismiss him. She waited until the last door closed, then said quietly, "You're staying close." "I thought we agreed on visibility limits," Daniel said. "We agreed on honesty," she replied. "This is me being honest. I need you where I can see you." He held her gaze. "That cuts both ways." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm doing it." At noon, the second subpoena hit. Broader this time. Names attached, the wrong names. Margaret swore under her breath. They're circling. Daniel leaned over the documents. They're being pointed. Eleanor's phone buzzed. She read the message once, then handed the phone to Daniel. An internal alert from a partner group chat he wasn't supposed to be on. Someone had dropped his name. Not as a hero, as a question. Who authorized Wright to access restricted files? Daniel felt the shift then. The subtle one. The way storms change direction without warning. Someone is setting a narrative, he said. Yes, Eleanor replied. And you're at the center of it. By mid-afternoon, HR knocked. 2 people. Neutral faces. Polite tone. This is procedural, the woman said. Temporary administrative leave while we review access logs. Eleanor did not raise her voice. No. It's standard, the man said. You need to step back, Eleanor said. He accessed nothing without my authorization. That authorization, the woman said, carefully creates a conflict. Daniel spoke before Eleanor could. If I'm sidelined now, the review collapses. You know that. The HR man looked uncomfortable. That may be necessary. Necessary. The word that excused everything. Eleanor stepped forward. This ends here. If you remove him, you remove me. And this firm will explain to regulators why its CEO stepped down in the middle of an active disclosure. Silence fell hard. HR left. Eleanor did not look at Daniel. She stared at the closed-door jaw tight. They're scared. They should be, Daniel said. At 4, Daniel's phone vibrated again. Unknown number. No pleasantries. They're coming for you next. Not legally. Internally. They'll say you overstepped, that you panicked, that you made it worse. Daniel typed back once. Who are you? No response. At 5, the building began to empty. The kind of quiet that wasn't peace, just exhaustion. Daniel stayed. Eleanor stayed. Margaret stayed. The 3 of them bent over timelines and names, building a map no one else wanted to see. That's it, Daniel said, finally tapping a line with his pen. That's where the approvals converge. Margaret leaned closer. That's impossible. It isn't, Daniel said. It's just uncomfortable. Eleanor looked at the name. A partner. Old guard. One of the men who had funded her first expansion when no one else would. Her face did not change, but something inside it did. At 7:30, security lights flicked on. The city outside turned dark glass and red brake lights. Eleanor poured herself a coffee she did not drink. You should go home, she said to Daniel. He shook his head. Not yet. She studied him. You're not afraid. I am, he said. I'm just used to acting anyway. She nodded slowly. That's a dangerous habit. It kept me alive, he replied. At 8:15, her phone rang. Board member. She took the call and her office door closed. Daniel watched her through the glass, the way she stood, the way she listened, the way her shoulders squared when the voice on the other end pushed too hard. When she came out, she looked older, not weaker, just more honest. They want a head, she said, before morning. Daniel did not ask whose. I won't give them yours, she added. He met her eyes. I won't let you give them the wrong one either. Another message buzzed on his phone. Final warning. If you trust her, make sure she trusts you more than her history. Daniel slipped the phone away and looked at Eleanor Brooks, the woman who had built an empire by never flinching first. Someone is going to leak tonight, he said. We can't stop it, but we can choose what they find. Her eyes sharpened. Go on. We release everything Daniel said, all 3 accounts, full context, names included, before anyone else does. That will burn bridges, she said. Yes, Daniel replied. The ones that deserve it. A long beat passed. Then Eleanor nodded once. "Do it," she said. As Daniel turned back to the files, he felt it. The final line crossed. The point of no return. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, the firm prepared to expose itself to survive. And somewhere in the building, the person who had sent the first warning realized they were about to lose control of the story. The leak did not come quietly. It broke at 9:12 in the evening when the trading desks were half lit and the newsrooms were starving for something real. A push alert rippled through phones and screens across the city, then the country. Voluntary disclosure, deferred liabilities, internal approvals, names redacted at first, then not. The firm's logo sat at the top of every article like a bruise. Daniel stood in Eleanor's office with the lights off, watching the city absorb the shock. Sirens cut through the night. Somewhere a television blared. His phone vibrated again and again until he turned it face down on the desk. Eleanor read in silence. She did not pace. She did not swear. She absorbed. When she finally spoke, her voice was even. "They're saying it came from inside legal." Daniel shook his head. "No. That's the decoy." He crossed the room and pulled a chair closer to the desk, leaned in, pointed to a paragraph halfway down the release. "This phrasing. It mirrors a memo that never left the partner level. Whoever leaked wanted to look helpful without exposing the real chain." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "You're sure?" "I am," Daniel said. "Because I wrote the original draft." She looked up sharply. "You what?" He did not flinch. 3 years ago, under a different title, different badge, same building. The silence that followed was not empty. It was loaded. "You never told me," Eleanor said. "You never asked," Daniel replied. "And I never volunteered. That was the agreement." Her gaze searched his face, recalibrating. "What title?" "Senior Risk Analyst," Daniel said. "Federal side. Seconded to private firms during the post-crisis reforms. I helped design the reporting language everyone learned to game later." Her breath stilled. "You were a regulator." "I was a problem," Daniel said. "To people who preferred the old ways." Eleanor turned back to the window. The city lights reflected in the glass fractured. "So you stepped down to be an assistant." "I stepped aside," Daniel said. "After my father got sick. After I learned what proximity to power costs when you can't afford the fight anymore." She absorbed that too. 1,000 past interactions rethreading in her mind. The calm, the restraint, the way he read rooms like weather, and the ledger she said. The warnings. Daniel nodded. Someone remembered who I was, or who I used to be. They didn't want this buried, but they didn't want blood either. Eleanor's phone rang. She answered without greeting. "Yes, I saw it." "No. We released first." "You're welcome. If you want a head take, the ones who signed." A pause. A sharp intake of breath on the other end. "No," she said. "I won't negotiate away the truth." She ended the call and set the phone down with care. "They're panicking. They should," Daniel said. "The story is bigger than one firm now." Margaret Lewis knocked once and entered without waiting. Her face was pale eyes bright. The partner just resigned. Eleanor did not ask which one. Margaret continued. "He claims he acted alone." Daniel closed his eyes for a beat. "He's buying time." "For whom?" Eleanor asked. "For the person who trained him," Daniel said. "And the one who still benefits." Margaret exhaled. "We have confirmation. Transfers routed through a family trust. Offshore. Old money." Eleanor's mouth tightened. "Bored." "Yes," Margaret said. The room felt smaller. At 10:40, security called. "There's a situation in the lobby." Eleanor and Daniel moved together without speaking. "Elevators down!" The doors opened to raised voices, cameras, a flash of anger in tailored suits. A former partner stood near the desk, red-faced, shouting about betrayal and loyalty. When he saw Eleanor, he went quiet. "You burned us," he said. "No," Eleanor replied. "You burned yourselves." His gaze flicked to Daniel. Recognition sparked. "You," he said. "I knew it." Daniel met his eyes. "You knew nothing," he said quietly. "You assumed." Security moved in. The man laughed once brittle. "You think this ends here?" Daniel stepped closer. "I think it ends with accountability." The cameras caught that. By midnight, the firm's servers were locked down, external counsel camped in conference rooms, coffee gone cold everywhere. Daniel sat at Eleanor's desk, not as a guest, not as an assistant, but as a partner in the work. They moved through documents, corrected false narratives, timed disclosures to blunt the worst of the damage. At 12:30, Daniel's phone buzzed with a number he recognized without saving. He stepped into the hall to answer. "You made your move," a voice said. "Older, controlled, bold." "You wanted this handled before it broke the wrong people," Daniel said. "That window closed." A pause. "I trusted you." "You trusted my restraint," Daniel said. "Not my silence." The voice hardened. "You don't understand what you've set in motion." "I do," Daniel replied. "I helped build the system you hid behind. I also know where it breaks." Another pause. Longer. "You're choosing her?" Daniel looked through the glass at Eleanor bent over the desk jaw, set sleeves rolled. "I'm choosing the truth," he said. "She's choosing to stand with it." The line went dead. Daniel returned to the office. Eleanor looked up. That was him. "Yes. Is it over?" "No," Daniel said. "But it's cleaner now." At 1:15, a single email landed in Eleanor's inbox. From the board. Brief, supportive, conditional. They would weather this, together, for now. Eleanor closed the laptop. Her shoulders sagged just a fraction. "You didn't have to do this," she said. Daniel leaned back exhausted. "Yes," he said. "I did." She studied him. Not the assistant, not the analyst. The man who had stepped forward when it cost him something again. "You stayed invisible on purpose," she said. "Yes." "And tonight, you stepped into the light." He met her gaze, only because it mattered. The city outside quieted. Snow began to fall, light and steady, softening the edges of a night that had cut deep. Eleanor poured 2 coffees and pushed one toward him. He took it. "For what it's worth," she said, "I see you now." Daniel did not smile. "That's a responsibility," he said, "not a reward." She nodded. "I'm learning that." They sat in the silence that followed, not comfortable, not awkward. Honest. The storm had not passed, but the direction was set. Somewhere above the city, the headlines continued to scroll. Somewhere inside, the firm old loyalties unraveled. And for the first time since the leak began, Daniel felt the ground under his feet hold. Morning came without relief. Daniel woke to the sound of his phone vibrating itself across the nightstand, a low mechanical rattle that felt personal now. 6 messages, 3 missed calls, 2 voicemails he did not open yet. The city outside his apartment window looked unchanged gray light over brick and steel, as if the night had not torn something open beneath it. He dressed without thinking. Dark suit, clean shirt, the same one he wore when he needed to disappear into credibility. By the time he stepped onto the street, the first headline had already shifted tone. Less shock, more speculation, names no longer redacted, questions sharpening. At the office, security was tighter, badges checked twice. A new guard at the desk younger, trying too hard not to stare. Daniel felt it anyway, the weight of recognition. He had crossed from unknown to known, and that door never closed cleanly. Eleanor was already in her office when he arrived. No coffee this time. Just a legal pad filled edge to edge with tight handwriting. She looked up as he entered, eyes scanning his face the way she scanned markets when they turned volatile. "They're calling it a reckoning," she said. Daniel nodded. "They always do. It makes people feel like the system still works." "And does it?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said. "When someone is willing to stand where the blast lands." Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. "The board wants a press appearance. Today." Daniel stiffened. "Too soon. They think silence looks like guilt. And panic looks like weakness," Daniel said. "Give them data, not faces." She studied him. "You're saying I shouldn't go out there." "I'm saying you shouldn't go out there alone," he replied. The words hung between them heavier than he intended. Eleanor leaned back slightly, not defensive, just thoughtful. "You don't want to be visible." "I don't want to be misused," Daniel said. "There's a difference." Before she could respond, Margaret Lewis appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, expression sharp. "We have confirmation," she said. "The trust roots back to a holding company registered under a family foundation. Same one tied to the Regulatory Advisory Board." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "So if we name them, we trigger Washington." "Yes," Margaret said. "And if we don't, they'll bury us under process." Daniel exhaled slowly. "Then this stops being about one firm." Margaret looked at him. "It already is." At 10, the first call from federal oversight came through. Formal, polite, ruthless in its calm. Eleanor took it on speaker. Daniel listened, eyes on the window watching traffic crawl. "We appreciate your cooperation," the voice said. "We'll need Mr. Wright available for interview." Eleanor answered before Daniel could. "He'll be represented." "Of course," the voice replied. "As will you." The call ended. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. "They're separating us." "Yes," Daniel said. "That's standard." "And effective. Only if one of us blinks." She looked at him. "Will you?" "No," Daniel said. "But they might expect you to." Her mouth curved humorless. "They've misjudged me before." By midday, the building buzzed with restrained chaos. Consultants huddled. Partners whispered. An assistant cried quietly in the break room. Daniel passed through it all like a ghost wearing a face people finally recognized. At 1:30, HR sent another email. Language careful, reassuring. An internal review. No conclusions. Yet. Daniel deleted it. At 2, Eleanor called him into her office and closed the door. "They want a name," she said. "A public one. Someone senior enough to satisfy the press, but distant enough to protect the core." Daniel met her gaze. "And you're considering it." "I'm considering survival," she said. He nodded once. "Then hear this. The moment you trade truth for containment, you lose control of the narrative. Permanently." She watched him closely. "You're asking me to burn bridges I built over decades. I'm asking you to stop protecting the wrong ones," he replied. Silence stretched taut. Eleanor stood and walked to the window. The city spread out below, indifferent. "Do you know why I kept my distance from you?" she asked quietly. Daniel did not answer. "Because I recognized something," she continued. "The way you watched, the way you chose restraint. People like you don't just work for systems. You test them. And systems don't like that. He said nothing. She turned back to him. If I do this your way, there's no undoing it. I know, Daniel said. That's why it works. Her phone buzzed again. She picked it up this time, listened, said nothing, then ended the call. They've scheduled the press conference. 4 o'clock. With or without me. Daniel felt the clock start to run. At 3, an email landed in his inbox, from an address he had not seen in years. No subject line. You taught us where the lines were. You didn't teach us what happens when someone crosses them. Daniel stared at the screen. Memories surfaced. Conference rooms, policy drafts, warnings given and ignored. He closed the laptop and stood. I need 10 minutes, he said. Eleanor frowned. For what? To make sure when this breaks, Daniel said it breaks all the way. He left her office without waiting for permission. The archives floor was quiet, fluorescent lights humming. Daniel unlocked a cabinet few people remembered existed. Inside were records from his former life, public filings, private memos, the connective tissue no one bothered to erase because they assumed no one would look. He photographed what mattered, sent it to legal, to Margaret, to Eleanor. By the time he returned upstairs, Eleanor's office was full. Legal, communications, security, faces tight with urgency. She looked at her screen, then at him. Something like awe flickered, then hardened into resolve. You just removed their leverage, she said. Yes, Daniel replied. Now they can only attack the truth. At 4, Eleanor stepped onto the small stage in the atrium. Cameras clicked. Microphones rose. Daniel stood off to the side, out of frame where he preferred. She spoke without notes. Calm. Direct. She named the failures. She named the structures. She named the accountability, including her own. She did not offer a scapegoat. She did not flinch. When questions came sharp and relentless, she answered them. When they asked about Daniel, she said only, he did his job. Nothing more, nothing less. The press conference ended with no applause, just a stunned quiet. Back in her office, Eleanor closed the door and leaned against it, breath finally leaving her in a long exhale. That was the point of no return, she said. Daniel nodded. Yes. She looked at him. Really looked. You could have stayed hidden. I tried, he said. And you chose not to. I chose timing, Daniel replied. There's a difference. Her phone buzzed one last time. A message from the board. Short, unambiguous. Proceed. Eleanor closed her eyes, then opened them. Whatever happens next, she said, they'll remember this moment. So will I, Daniel said. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside lines had been redrawn. Daniel felt the familiar pull of distance, but it no longer fit the same way. He had stepped forward again, knowing the cost. And somewhere beyond the cameras and headlines, the real consequences were just beginning to surface. The fallout arrived disguised as order. By the next morning, the firm looked cleaner than it ever had. Desks cleared, doors closed, calendars wiped and rebuilt with surgical precision. An interim protocol memo landed in every inbox at 8 sharp, its language calm, its implications brutal. Independent oversight, temporary suspensions, mandatory interviews. The machine had shifted from survival to judgment. Daniel felt it the moment he stepped off the elevator. Conversations paused, then resumed a fraction too late. People watched him like they watched weather alerts with interest and a hint of dread. He moved through it without reaction. Years of practice. When you knew storms, you learned not to flinch at clouds. Eleanor called him into her office before 9. No assistants, no legal. Just the two of them and the city framed behind glass. They're formalizing the inquiry, she said. External counsel, full cooperation. Daniel nodded. That means parallel investigations. Yes, she said. Federal. Civil, internal, and reputational, he added. She did not deny it. That one never ends. She slid a document across the desk. He read it once. Then again. His jaw tightened. They want me on leave, he said. They want distance, Eleanor replied. From the story. From me. From the leverage. I represent, Daniel said. Her eyes held his. I pushed back. I know, he said. It's still the right move. She leaned back, exhaled slowly. You don't have to accept it. Daniel shook his head. If I stay visible, they turn me into the narrative. If I step away, the facts get louder. Silence settled between them. Not strained. Weighted. I won't protect you by pretending you don't exist, Eleanor said. I wouldn't respect you if you did. Daniel replied. She handed him a second document. Voluntary leave. Access limited. Communications filtered through counsel. Temporary in theory. When she asked. Now Daniel said. He stood, adjusted his jacket, the old reflex kicking in. I'll need copies of everything. You'll have them, she said. And Daniel. Yes, I meant what I said yesterday, she continued. About seeing you. He met her gaze. Seeing isn't the same as holding on. Her mouth tightened. I know. The walk back to his desk felt longer than usual. Margaret Lewis was waiting, arms crossed, eyes sharp. They're nervous, she said. Which means you were effective. Effectiveness has a shelf life, Daniel replied. She studied him. You're stepping out. Yes. For how long? As long as it takes for the truth to stand without me, he said. She nodded once. Respect again. Be careful, she said. They don't like variables they can't control. He packed slowly. Not because there was much. He had never accumulated clutter. A notebook. A pen. The leather folder with nothing written on the cover. As he slid it into his bag, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. You did what you said you would. Now comes the part you can't manage. Daniel did not reply. Security escorted him out. Not roughly, not apologetically either. Procedure wrapped in courtesy. The lobby smelled of polish and stale coffee. Cameras were gone, but the echo of them lingered. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent as ever. The days that followed blurred. Interviews, calls with counsel, long hours alone with documents and memories. Daniel sat at his kitchen table, sunlight shifting across the wood as he traced patterns others had tried to hide. The further he followed them, the clearer the shape became. This had never been about one firm, or one CEO, or even one set of approvals. It was about culture. A tolerance built over decades. Small compromises stacked until they became architecture. On the fourth day, Eleanor called. They're pressing harder, she said. Not publicly. Quietly. Of course they are, Daniel replied. Silence is cheaper. They want me to settle, she continued. Limit exposure. Frame it as isolated misconduct. And are you considering it? He asked. A pause. No, she said. But the pressure is coordinated. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Then they've realized containment failed. Yes, Eleanor said, and they're looking for another way. That way arrived the next morning in the form of a subpoena addressed to Daniel personally. Broader scope. Older records. His former work. His past. They were widening the circle. Eleanor arrived at his apartment an hour later unannounced. No entourage, no armor, just a coat thrown over determination. She stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in the smallness of the space, the order, the absence of excess. They're trying to intimidate you, she said. Daniel poured 2 coffees. They're trying to exhaust me. She took the mug, hands warming around it. I should never have let it get this far. You didn't, he said. It was already far. You just turned the lights on. She watched him over the rim of the cup. They think if they break you, the rest collapses. They misunderstand what holds it up, Daniel said. She set the mug down. Then tell me. He met her gaze. People watching. People deciding whether truth is worth inconvenience. That's what they're afraid of. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. And you. And me, he agreed. I'm a reminder that systems remember their architects. She smiled faintly. You sound like a threat. I sound like a consequence, he replied. That afternoon news broke again. Not about the firm. About a foundation. An advisory board. Names surfacing slowly, methodically. The story widened. The pressure shifted. Eleanor stood at the window, phone in hand, watching the city absorb another shock. They're losing control, she said. Yes, Daniel replied, and they won't forgive that. She turned to him. Neither will I. In the quiet that followed, something settled between them. Not relief, not victory, alignment. The kind forged under strain when illusion burned away and only intention remained. Daniel felt the familiar pull to step back, to disappear once more. He resisted it, not because he wanted the spotlight, but because he understood now that absence could be a form of complicity. Outside, sirens wailed faintly. Somewhere downtown, another door closed, another line crossed. The reckoning had moved past the firm and into the bloodstream of the system that fed it. And Daniel, no longer invisible, stood exactly where he needed to be. The hearing room smelled like old paper and restraint. Daniel sat at the narrow table with his hands folded, palms flat, suit pressed, spine straight. Across from him, 3 federal investigators reviewed files they already knew by heart. Behind the glass, observers pretended not to watch. Eleanor was not there. That was deliberate. Distance again. This time chosen. State your name for the record, the woman in the center said. Daniel Wright, he replied. His voice did not echo. It landed and stayed. You understand you're here voluntarily? Yes. And that this inquiry concerns not only your actions at Brooks Advisory, but your prior role in federal regulatory design? Yes. They moved carefully. Dates, titles, committees, language precise enough to wound. Daniel answered without embellishment. He had learned long ago that the truth did not need decoration. It needed consistency. Why leave federal service? The man to the left asked. Daniel did not hesitate. My father suffered a stroke. I became his primary caregiver. I needed predictability. I chose proximity to stability over proximity to power. A pause. Pens scratched. The woman in the center glanced up. And yet you stepped back into power. No, Daniel said. Power stepped into me. That earned a look. Not hostile, curious. They pressed harder. Old memos, draft language, provisions he had argued against and lost, the ones that became loopholes. He named them, named the rooms, named the votes. He did not protect reputations. He protected accuracy. You're aware, the woman said finally, that your testimony complicates this case significantly. I'm aware, Daniel replied. That's why I'm here. When it ended, 3 hours had passed. Daniel walked out into cold afternoon light that felt too sharp after fluorescent stillness. His phone buzzed immediately. Eleanor. How did it go? She asked. They listened, Daniel said. Which means they're worried. That's good, she replied. It's dangerous, he corrected. Worry accelerates decisions. She was quiet for a moment. They've scheduled my appearance. Tomorrow. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. They'll test you. I know. They'll offer you exits, he continued. Quiet ones. I won't take them. I know, he said again. That's what worries me. The next morning, the city woke under low clouds. Eleanor stood at the podium with cameras aligned like instruments. She spoke the way she always had. Calm. Measured. She acknowledged failure. Accepted responsibility. Refused simplification. Daniel watched from a side room, the feed delayed by seconds. He noticed the way certain questions were framed, not to understand, to isolate. When it ended, her phone rang immediately. Board members, donors, old allies choosing words carefully. By afternoon, the pressure shifted again. A draft settlement proposal surfaced. Broad, appealing. It would end public scrutiny quickly. It would require silence. Eleanor forwarded it to Daniel without comment. He read it once, then again. He felt the old fatigue creep in, the one that came from knowing how often systems offered comfort in exchange for amnesia. He called her. "They're asking you to contain the story," he said. "They're asking me to protect the firm." She replied. "At the cost of the truth," he said. "Yes." Silence hung between them. "I won't tell you what to do," Daniel said finally. "But understand this. If you accept the pattern survives, it just waits. And if I don't," Eleanor said, voice low, "they will try to destroy what I built." Daniel did not soften it. "They'll try anyway." That night, Eleanor did not go home. She sat alone in her office, city lights blinking like signals she no longer trusted. She thought of the years spent building walls, of the comfort those walls had provided, of the cost. Daniel sat in his apartment, papers spread across the table, tracing lines that never stopped at one name. He felt the old instinct to retreat, to let institutions grind themselves down without him. He ignored it. The next morning, Eleanor declined the settlement. The reaction was immediate. Market speculation, legal escalation, quiet threats wrapped in polite language. By midday, an emergency board session was called. This time, Daniel was invited. He stood at the back of the room, not at the table. He listened as voices rose and fell, as fear masqueraded as pragmatism. "We can't fight everyone," one board member said. "No," Eleanor replied, "but we can choose who we don't become." A man near the end of the table laughed softly. "That's very principled. It's also very expensive." Daniel spoke before he could stop himself. "So is rebuilding trust after you trade it away." Heads turned. Surprise. Disapproval. Interest. "Who authorized him to speak?" The man snapped. "I did," Eleanor said. Daniel met their eyes one by one. "You can settle this and call it resolution," he said. "Or you can let it run its course and call it reform. Only one of those outlives you." Silence followed. Not agreement. Consideration. After the meeting, Eleanor stopped him in the hall. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," Daniel said. "I did." She studied him. "You're not invisible anymore." "I never was," he replied. "You just didn't look." That night a story broke that no one expected. Another firm, another disclosure, then another. The pattern widened. What had been isolated became systemic. Daniel watched it unfold with a strange calm. This was the moment he had always known would come, the one where restraint failed and responsibility took its place. Eleanor called late. Her voice was steady, but something underneath had shifted. "They're calling it a wave." Daniel looked out at the city lights, scattered like constellations rewritten. "It always is," he said. "Once someone proves it's survivable." She was quiet for a moment. "I don't know what happens after this." He smiled faintly. "Neither do I, but I know what doesn't." Outside, the city hummed. Inside, something older and harder had begun to move. And for the first time, Daniel did not feel the urge to disappear. The first resignation came quietly. No press release, no farewell email. Just a name removed from a committee roster and a calendar invite canceled without explanation. Daniel noticed it because he had trained himself to notice absences more than presences. Power rarely announced when it retreated. It slipped away and waited to be forgotten. By the end of the week, there were 5 more. Daniel sat at his kitchen table laptop open, coffee gone cold, tracking patterns across screens that no longer belonged to one firm or one industry. Financial advisory boards, regulatory councils, think tanks that shaped policy while pretending not to. The same surnames appeared again and again, connected through foundations and advisory roles, insulated by distance and tradition. It was not a conspiracy. It was something more durable. Familiarity. Eleanor called just after sunset. "They're reorganizing the board," she said. "Voluntarily. At least that's how they're presenting it." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "They're buying time." "Yes. And legitimacy," he added. She was quiet for a moment. "I don't know how long I can hold this line." "You don't have to hold it forever," Daniel said. "Just long enough for it to matter." She exhaled slowly. "You sound certain." "I'm not," he replied. "I'm practiced." The next morning, Daniel returned to the firm for the first time since his leave began. Not as an employee, not as a witness, as an observer invited by counsel to review procedural gaps. The lobby felt smaller. The security guard nodded with recognition that bordered on relief. Some people avoided him. Others watched openly now, curiosity replacing fear. Margaret Lewis met him near the elevators. "They're nervous," she said. "That's new?" They were nervous before Daniel replied. "Now they're uncertain." She smiled thinly. "That's worse." They walked the floors together. Empty desks, reassigned offices, interim leadership trying to project continuity while everything underneath shifted. Daniel felt the familiar urge to withdraw, to return to the margins where observation was safer. He resisted it again. In the afternoon, a junior analyst approached him near the copy room. Early 30s, eyes tired, voice careful. "I just wanted to say thank you." Daniel looked at him. "For what?" "For not letting them pretend this was an accident," the man said. "My father lost his pension after the last one. No one ever explained why." Daniel nodded once. "I'm sorry." The analyst hesitated. "I didn't think people like you existed anymore." Daniel watched him walk away. Felt something settle uncomfortably in his chest. Visibility was never neutral. It came with expectations he had never wanted. By Friday, the media had shifted again. Less outrage, more analysis. Long pieces tracing history, connecting dots that had once been dismissed as coincidence. The wave Eleanor had named was no longer metaphorical. It had momentum. That night, Eleanor asked him to meet her somewhere neutral, a small restaurant near the river. No cameras, no aides, just a corner table and the quiet hum of people trying to enjoy their evening. She arrived without ceremony. No suit, no armor. Just a dark coat and the lines of exhaustion she no longer bothered to hide. "They offered me a role," she said after the waiter left. "Advisory. National. It would move me out of the line of fire." Daniel did not react immediately. "And would it silence you?" "Yes," she said. "In ways that would sound reasonable." He nodded. "And are you considering it?" She met his eyes. "I'm considering what happens if I don't." He leaned back slightly. "You've already changed the outcome. The rest is cost." She smiled faintly. "You always reduce it to structure. It's how I survive," he said. She studied him over the rim of her glass. "What happens to you after this?" Daniel looked out the window at the water moving steadily beneath the lights. I go back to being useful where it matters. And where is that? Where systems pretend not to need watching, he replied. She laughed softly, not amused, recognizing. You're leaving. I was never meant to stay, he said gently. Proximity was temporary. Silence stretched between them, not painful, honest. I used to think control was the same as safety, Eleanor said. Now I think it was just delay. Daniel nodded. That's a common mistake. She reached into her bag and slid something across the table. A letter, unopened, handwritten address. They sent this to the firm, she said. For you. Daniel did not open it. He turned it once, feeling the weight of paper and intent. You read it. Yes. And... She hesitated. They're asking you to advise, quietly, informally, from the inside. Daniel exhaled slowly. That's not advice. That's assimilation. That's what I thought she said. He pushed the letter back toward her. Send it back. She did not argue. Outside, the river moved on indifferent to reputations and reforms. Inside, the last course arrived and was barely touched. The following week, announcements came in steady succession. New oversight frameworks, public hearings, a task force with real authority. Not everything Daniel had hoped for, enough to make reversal difficult. He packed his apartment without urgency. He had lived lightly for years. It showed. A few boxes, a single suitcase, the notebook he had carried through all of it. On his last day in the city, Eleanor walked with him along the river. The air was cold, clear. They'll write about you, she said, eventually. They already are, Daniel replied. They just haven't decided who I'm supposed to be. She stopped walking. And who are you? He considered it. Someone who stepped forward when the cost was finally lower than the silence. She nodded. I wish I'd learned that sooner. So do most people, he said. They stood there for a moment watching the water carry reflections downstream. No promises, no declarations, just acknowledgement. As Daniel turned away, Eleanor spoke again. You were never invisible. He looked back. I know. The city receded behind him as he walked. The wave continued without him, just as it should. Systems adjusted. People adapted. Memory settled into record. And Daniel Wright, once overlooked, once underestimated, carried forward, not as a symbol, but as something rarer and more dangerous to the wrong people. An example. Daniel left the city before dawn. No send-off, no final meeting. Just the quiet weight of a train station, waking up the smell of coffee and metal, the low murmur of strangers carrying their own endings forward. He sat by the window coat folded beside him, watching Chicago recede into lines and angles that no longer belonged to him. For years, he had measured distance as safety. Now it felt like choice. The weeks that followed did not slow. They clarified. Hearings concluded. Reports hardened into findings. Names settled into public record no longer whispered. Some people lost positions. Others lost reputations. A few lost both. The system did not collapse. It adjusted the way all systems did when pressure was applied from the right angle for long enough. Daniel worked quietly again, but not invisibly. He consulted where oversight mattered most, advising task forces that preferred facts over optics. He slept little. He listened more. He stayed away from cameras. He had learned what attention cost and what it could buy. He chose restraint again, but this time without fear. Eleanor stayed. She did not retreat into advisory obscurity. She did not accept the offered exit that came dressed as honor. She rebuilt the firm publicly, methodically absorbing criticism without deflection. Her name became associated not with scandal, but with the rare act of standing still while everything demanded retreat. They spoke occasionally, Brief calls, updates without sentimentality, mutual respect stripped of illusion. What passed between them was not unfinished business. It was acknowledgement, and that was enough. One evening, months later, Daniel sat alone in a quiet apartment far from the lake reviewing a draft oversight framework that would never bear his name. Outside traffic moved steadily anonymous and persistent. He closed the document, set the pen down, and felt something unfamiliar. Stillness. Not the kind born of avoidance, the kind earned. He thought of the man he had been when flowers first appeared on a desk that no one looked at. A man who survived by shrinking. By staying useful, but unseen. That man had believed power belonged only to those who claimed it loudly. He knew better now. Power, he had learned, was the ability to refuse the wrong bargain. To stand where silence expected compliance. To be seen without needing to be claimed. Somewhere in the country, another firm was being examined. Another pattern questioned. Another person deciding whether to step forward or wait it out. Daniel did not know their name. He did not need to. The work continued without him at the center. That was the point. He turned off the lamp, letting the room settle into shadow, and allowed himself the smallest smile. Not because he had won, but because he had not disappeared. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of someone overlooked, or a moment when speaking up mattered more than staying comfortable, take a second to show your support. Like the video, subscribe for more stories like this, and leave a comment with 3 simple words, I see you.